Hello, this is Lucas. I'm back in my kitchen, still waiting out the ever-worsening coronavirus here in China. But I thought I'd do a little wrap-up of the whole month for the things that I read. I read 5 novels this month. I read 4 magazines. I read the January 6th New Yorker, the January and February editions of Harper's, and the January-February edition of The Atlantic, which I enjoy reading. My subscription ended to The New Yorker, and I would have renewed it had it not been for this situation, which puts me in some, not financial trouble, but I gotta clamp down. Anyway, I read 4 poems. I read Old War Dreams, which I made a video for, and it's creepy, and the audio is really baked. And I read, that's by Walt Whitman. I read Ilya Kaminsky's We Were Happy During the War, I think that's what it's called. And of course I read Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Sonnet 43, How Do I Love Thee, Let Me Count the Ways, for Poetry Thursday, and just the other day I did The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats, a very concerned poem for concerning times, which would be always. It is a timeless poem. And I read 5 novels, which I mentioned before, or I read some novels and 2 histories. The histories include, I have some notes on this covering for an art book. Christendom Destroyed, Europe 1517 to 1648, which talked about sort of the effects of the Lutheran Reform and everything that happened after that, and talked about Calvin, had all these wonderful facts and figures. It was a mixed reading. It was part of a series done by Penguin to recount history, Western history, from the beginning. And it's a great book. It's just kind of brought down by the rush of all these names and numbers that come at you, and there are times where you want to learn more about something. But the great thing about it is that even though you only get brief glimpses into each moment, it has a wealth of knowledge of things that might interest you, so it did its job in that respect. And I read East West Street, The History of Genocide and Crimes Against Humanity, which was about these 2 lawyers who worked on the Nuremberg trials from the same town in Lviv, Ukraine. It was not Lviv at the time, it was Lemberg, and it was part of Poland, I believe. And just the sort of infighting to charge these criminals to the fullest with their atrocities. And that doesn't really do it justice. It's an amazing book, and I highly recommend it. It is really emotional for being about international law, the history of international law, but it's a powerful read. And I suppose Dreyer's English, it's more of like a reference book. I did a review for all these books, and I'll leave a link to them in the description box. Dreyer's English is a reference book to help you with your writing, and it is funny. The first part, the stuff in the front, part 1, is more engaging because Dreyer's able to give more examples to show you how these punctuation or grammar rules, I don't know if grammatical is a word, but how all these rules work, and how what he does when he comes in contact with it, and his reasoning. And the second half is smaller stuff that it's still fun to read, but it's the part 2, the stuff in the back, it's not as fun, but it's still worth your time if you're interested in that thing. And I read a Star Wars extended universe novel, Tarkin, came out in 2014 by James Luceno, and it is about Tarkin and Vader on a mission to cut through the bureaucratic red rope to check out a cache of, it's not weapons, communication devices, I think, which ends up being a trap, and Tarkin's ship is stolen, and the sort of rebels are hoping to use it for propaganda to overthrow the Empire, or raise rebellious spirit so that the Empire can be overthrown, because they are indeed bad guys. And it's a wonderful sort of dark side triumvirate character study of Tarkin. And it, you might be able to hear my Chinese roommates yelling. I'm not sure what about. They might not be angry at each other. They might just be talking. Chinese people tend to yell. Not about everything. I don't know. It's a little unnerving, but they always seem fine, so I don't know. Anyway, it is about the rise of Tarkin to the status of Grand Moff Tarkin, and it's a good character study of him. Nothing groundbreaking, but it's a fun read. And the last book I read is a classic. It was a reread from a decade ago, 1984, by George Orwell, and it's still fantastic, horrifying as it is. I found some bits of hope in it, because last time I read it, I didn't read the appendix, because I thought, what's the point in that? Or my version didn't have it, or something. I don't remember what. Or maybe I did read it and I didn't make sense of it, and I just thought, why is this here? I don't understand. I was not a smart reader then. Because it gives me hope, because it talks about the language of Oceania, of Ingsoc, in past tense, Newspeak, which would mean that Newspeak failed, which probably means, most likely, that Ingsoc was overthrown, presumably by the proletariat. And I think there are some kinds of hints within the book just to show you the bureaucratic mess of this government and the ridiculous lengths they go to just constantly write history, rewrite it. And that is horrifying, but it's got to slow things down so much. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on that. Anyway, that is what I did for the month for my reading. I will make a TBR video tomorrow, and we'll see what I'm going to do for February. And I've made a review or a poetry reading for all of these except the magazines. I don't really see a reason to do that, but you never know, maybe one day I will. So yeah, I will hide back in my room and see you next time.